Welcome to our program, Astronomy for Everyone. With me today is John Kirchhoff, General Manager of Rider's Hobby in Ypsilanti. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Don. And I really appreciate a chance coming out and talking to everybody today about my favorite hobby, amateur astronomy.
Well, as we approach the holiday season, we've got quite an array of items for the amateur astronomer that he or she might hope to find under the Christmas tree. John, start out.
Okay. One thing a lot of people don't realize, they actually have something that's very good for amateur astronomy, many times sitting in their closet. That's binoculars. With our unaided eye, if we were to go outside at night, we can see something on the order of 2,500 stars on a good, dark night out in the country. By taking a pair of binoculars and using those in our hobby in amateur astronomy, we can see over 10,000 stars.
Wow, that's quite an increase.
Absolutely. So let's talk just a little bit about binoculars first, what the numbers mean, what would be a good pair of binoculars for amateur astronomy.
Sounds good, John.
Okay, I brought with me from our shop 4 different pairs of binoculars. Perhaps a lot of you are familiar with this style of binocular. This is something that you might see at a football game. They're very lightweight, very portable, but probably not the best for astronomy. The reason why, astronomy, many of the objects that we look at are fairly faint, and what we want to look for is something with a fairly large lens up in the front to gather light.
Wider than what we see on this pair here.
Exactly right. The numbers on this particular binocular tells us a lot. It says 8 by 25, and the first number is the magnification. The second number is the diameter of that front lens in millimeters. Okay, so they have 8 times light gathering, or 8 times closer, which is good.
Yes.
25 millimeter lens, about 1 inch. Okay. The problem is our eyes with this pair of binocular will be able to see quite a few more stars than we could naked eye, but we can do quite a bit better than that. Let's go to another pair of binoculars. We've bumped up the size a little bit with this pair, 8 by 42s, and you can see the same amount of magnification as what we had before. But now look at the diameter of the lens.
Quite a bit bigger.
Right. So with this type of binocular, now we can really start to see a number of different deep sky objects, as well as a close-up view of the moon and the planets.
Interesting.
Okay? So let's go up even one more size. Here we have a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars. 10 by 50s have long been regarded as kind of a standard size of binocular for amateur astronomy. We've jumped the magnification a little bit more to 10 power. We've also increased the diameter of this lens to 50 millimeters.
This is even bigger than the one previous.
Absolutely. With a pair of binoculars like these, we can see many, I would say probably on the neighborhood of 100 different deep sky objects, probably even a larger number than that, including galaxies, nebula, open star clusters, and with the 10 power magnification, we could even see the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, so craters on the moon. So we could really see quite a bit with a pair of binoculars of this size. One thing though, do notice a pair of binoculars like this is starting to get relatively heavy. That's the one trade-off that we run into as we get into larger and larger binoculars.
You get more aperture, but more weight.
Exactly right. So with this particular pair, there's actually a cover so that you can attach a little L-shaped bracket, and we can actually put that pair of binoculars on a standard camera tripod. That'll take off some of the weight, make them a little bit easier to use.
I can see we're holding these up for a period of time. After a while, they're going to get heavier and heavier.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and just in case you haven't worn yourself out yet, let's go to the next size. This is probably about as large a pair of binoculars as you're commonly going to see when you go to a star party. This is a pair of 20 by 80 binoculars. They have a tremendous amount of light gathering ability, as you can see by that lens up in the front.
Absolutely.
Just a humongous amount. But remember, 20 power. So the problem that you're going to run into with a pair of binoculars like this, one, they're heavy. Two, you're not going to be able to hold those binoculars steady enough to get a good, sharp, clear view of the object you want to look at. Because of that, this particular company, Celestron, has added a bracket, and again, this is set up so it can be mounted to a camera tripod.
It's the typical quarter 20?
Quarter 20 attachment, exactly right. So we would go ahead, take this pair of binoculars, plunk them down on a camera tripod, and use a chair that we can kind of slide down underneath, you know, perhaps like a low folding chair.
Or a chaise lounge, perhaps?
Sure, absolutely. And actually go ahead and use these binoculars for astronomy that way. They'll steady down enough with that camera tripod to do a good job holding them steady enough and giving you good views.
Well, that's great, John.
We've used these many, many times. They're definitely a hit at a lot of the star parties. So lots of objects you can see.
You've given us a good overview of the binoculars. Where do you want to go next?
Well, I think what I'd like to do next is let's talk about how do you find some of these objects that are in the nighttime sky.
Good point.
Okay?
Good point.
This device came out about 4 years ago, and it revolutionized amateur astronomy. It's actually a personal planetarium. It's called the Sky Scout, and with this device, you can aim it and actually have the device tell you what you're looking at. There's a screen that's on the side here that when it's activated will actually give you an idea of what you're looking at, how far away it is, and really give you a lot of good information about the target. It works by a GPS. It has a built-in GPS system. It has a built-in inclinometer, so it actually knows how it's tipped and where it's looking in the sky. And it has a very extensive database, over 7,000 objects in this device. So you could use this, say for instance, maybe if you go down south and you're not familiar with stars in the nighttime sky down south, you could use this as a pointing aid and to find out where those objects are.
Great.
If you're getting started in the hobby, it's a great way because it will actually tell you the objects that you're looking at and where they are in the sky. We can do one of two things. We can activate it either in a chase mode. So if you know that you want to look at Jupiter, but you're not certain where Jupiter is, it will actually project a little tiny red arrow in the display, and we'll simply follow it to Jupiter, at which time a little ring of light will go all the way around the target. Or if we see a star and we don't know the name of it, we can point it, click on the top, and it will tell us what we're looking at.
Interesting.
So
well,
really
John,
nice high tech.
This is great. There's a few other things we want to cover on the table in this first segment of our show.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you'd like to cover here?
Absolutely. Yeah. Did I bring too many toys with us today?
John, there are never too many toys for the amateur astronomer.
All right.
Trust me.
Okay, let's go over and cover some of the books. One thing, if you're getting started in the hobby, this should be one of the very first things that you buy. It's called a star wheel or a planisphere. This device, you simply turn the wheel so that the time matches the date that you go out, and that will give you a good idea of where constellations are in the sky. What's great, if you can find even one, like the Big Dipper, you can match that Big Dipper up by holding it over your head and pointing it in the right direction. You can find that one constellation and then kind of work from that to find several of the other constellations that are out there in the sky. Moon maps are very handy, and there are several good ones that are on the market. Books, the Pocket Sky Atlas, and also the Binocular Highlight book by Sky and Telescope. They're wonderful and will really get you going in the right direction. If you have never purchased a telescope, or you're thinking about it and you really don't know what to get, I would hardly recommend this particular book. It's called Night Watch by Terence Dickerson.
Excellent book. I have a copy myself.
Yep, absolutely. It's in its fourth printing. It's sold over 500,000 copies, and it's just one of the best intro astronomy books out on the market.
Terrific, terrific. A lot of good, helpful things to help along the budding amateur astronomer, or even one who's been in the hobby for a few years.
Absolutely, yep. Let's see, we have a couple other things here too. Do we have the time to talk about those?
Well, I think that what we'll do is we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about telescopes, and we can cover some of the other items that fit in with the telescope, such as the eyepieces. And we're going to do that right after this public service announcement, so please stand by. Welcome back. I'm here in the studio with my special guest, John Kirchhoff from Rider's Hobby. Now, John, in the first part of our program, we were talking about some of the accessory items that an amateur astronomer would have. But if someone's interested in getting into a telescope, buying their first telescope for themselves or for their children, where would be a good place to start?
Well, Don, we have a wide variety of different telescopes to choose from, but one of my favorites is the little first scope by Celestron. It came out this year. The price is incredible at $59. It's a little 3-inch reflecting design telescope that will really show you quite a few things in the nighttime sky.
I think we have one right over here, don't we?
We sure do. This telescope was actually introduced by Celestron for International Year of Astronomy. It has kind of a zebra finish to it almost, but if you look closely, all of the little white writings on the side of the tube are actually astronomers through the ages, including Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, famous names in astronomy. This little telescope has a 3-inch mirror down at the base of the telescope, so it's called a Newtonian reflector.
After Sir Isaac Newton.
Exactly right. It was designed by, that particular design was done by Newton back in the 1600s. This particular mounting system is called a Dobsonian mount, and we'll get to that a little bit later as well on another telescope that we have here, but it's basically a very simple up, down, left and right type mount. The beauty of this telescope is that a child could take this telescope out and really have a good time with it. And as you can see, it's small, it's portable. You could set that up on a picnic table, hood of a car, wherever you want to go, and you've got an instant platform for doing astronomy.
Great first scope. It really lives up to its name.
Absolutely. There's also a little accessory set available for it. Briefly, it comes with a couple additional eyepieces. You do get a finder telescope with it, a carry bag, and even a way to print out star charts on a little CD.
Great.
Let's jump to this telescope, and this is probably more what somebody would think of when they think about buying a telescope. It looks like a telescope.
Exactly.
This is a 90mm refractor. We were talking about the diameter of the lenses with the binoculars earlier. That means that this particular telescope has a 90mm lens up in the front. This is on a very simple L-azimuth mount. I simply can move this telescope left and right, and you can also move it up and down. I like to call this our patio telescope because it also doubles as a good bird watching telescope, or if you wanted to look at freighters out on the lake, it would do a magnificent job for you that way.
Interesting.
For astronomy at night, it'll show you Saturn's rings. You could see cloud banding on Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and a lot of different deep sky objects.
All in that one scope. Amazing.
Absolutely. Yep.
What's next?
Okay, the next one is we're going to get away from the refractor design. This is another Newtonian reflector. This happens to be a little bit larger. This one is 5-inch in diameter. And you can see there's a mirror down at the base, or you can imagine that there's a mirror in the base anyhow. This particular model has a computer control on it so that you can literally keypad in what you want to see after you do an alignment and go to the target. The beauty of that is, with just a very little bit of learning the nighttime sky, you can actually have this telescope point and then track on objects for you.
Does it take a lot of knowledge of astronomy for a person to be able to use this, John?
Absolutely not. The thing that's nice about this telescope and with the Sky Align system, all you need to do are find 3 different points out in space. You don't even need to know what they are. 2 stars, a star, a planet, and the moon, whatever. It can track or figure out what the sky looks like and actually take you to your targets that way. That's their Sky Align system. It works very, very well. Let's go to one other design here. This is the one that I wanted to, or that I did want to talk about earlier as far as the Dobsonian mount.
Yes, we have that right here.
Yep. This is an 8-inch reflector. And you brought this telescope over from the Detroit Science Center earlier.
Yes, I
today.
did. We use this for some of our public outreach there at the Science Center.
The beauty of this telescope is it's very, very simple to use. It's up, down, left, and right. You do need to have a basic knowledge of the sky so that you know where to point the telescope if you want to look at particular objects in the sky. However, if you just want to cruise the sky and find different things or take a look at different objects, you can certainly do that as well. It's a very, very simple telescope. There's no alignment procedure that you have to do. Very, very easy telescope to use.
Now the motion on this seems to be rather intuitive, up, down, left, right. But it seems that these previous 2 telescopes here will track the sky for you once you, or this one right next to us, I should say, will track the object for you, where this one, you have to push the telescope along yourself to keep it in the field of view?
Yeah, you are exactly right there. You do have to bump this telescope along to follow your target, but the beauty of it is with that additional light gathering ability, like we were talking about earlier, many of the objects that we look at in space are relatively faint, and without spending a king's ransom on optics and a big telescope, this gives you a very, very affordable telescope with a lot of light gathering ability at a price of in the $300 to $400 price range.
I see. So we have the larger opening here to gather more light than these previous telescopes, so we'll be able to see fainter objects more clearly?
That's correct. Yep. There's 3 things that you want to think about with power in telescopes. Basically, most people would come into the shop, and when they mention power, I know that they're talking about magnification. Don't buy a telescope just based on magnification. You can take a very tiny telescope and put a large eyepiece or a high power eyepiece on it and have a magnification factor that's going to be totally unusable. About 50 power for every inch of aperture is about the right, or about the maximum magnification that we can expect with a telescope. 2 other things that are very important are resolving power and also light gathering ability. In amateur astronomy, you know about light gathering ability and you know about resolving power. Okay? So when you talk power, you need to consider all 3 of those. Resolving power, the ability to see fine detail. Light gathering ability, the ability to see faint objects. And then, thirdly, magnification.
So if somebody were to see a telescope in a department store or dime store that shows magnifications of 800 or 1,000 power, they should think 2 or 3 times before purchasing that
They
scope?
should probably run out the door.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, that type of magnification really isn't going to be very usable, not in a small telescope, okay?
Right.
Very, very rarely do we much get over 300 power here in Michigan, either due to the atmosphere or just the objects that we're looking at. We do a lot of looking at 50 power to 100 power.
Well, what kind of a view do you think we could get with this telescope right here?
Well, this one is actually an 8-inch, and it's called a Cassegrain, or a Schmidt-Cassegrain design telescope. This particular model is made by a company called Celestron. It's fully computerized. It does have a GPS system installed in the telescope itself, so it actually knows where it is on the ground. The alignment procedure is similar to what we were describing with the 5-inch reflector over there, but it will actually download the time, the date, and the observing location because of the GPS satellites automatically into the telescope. Many people feel, once they're in the hobby a bit, that the 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain design telescope is one of the most versatile designs on the market today. You can do astrophotography with it. You can do deep sky observing because it has enough aperture. You can do planetary work. It's a good all-round design. And if you notice, compared to the 8-inch reflector here, it actually is quite a bit smaller in the actual physical size of the telescope. That has to do with the lens design and the way the light moves back and forth in the optic.
I know our viewers out there are thinking, this is great technology, but how much does it cost? Is there a ballpark range you can let the viewers know?
This particular model sells for about $2,000, but you can get an entry-level Schmidt-Cassegrain 8-inch style telescope now for just over $1,000. One thing that I've really discovered over the years, it's incredible how inexpensive telescopes have become compared to back in the 60s and the 70s. Many different types of models out on the market today at very, very affordable pricing.
Well, this is a fascinating scope, but I think our viewers have noticed the gold-colored telescope that we went by a little bit earlier. If we could just take about a minute or so and
Sure.
let them know what that little telescope is all about.
One thing that I've done on this particular telescope is actually punched in a target, and we're not going to be able to see it quite through the studio ceiling, but if I go ahead and hit enter, it would actually move to a galaxy called M110 if we were outside.
Great. Oh, what's this little guy down here, John?
Well, we don't have to do all of our astronomy at night. This happens to be called a PST, which stands for Personal Solar Telescope. This particular telescope will allow you to see the sun in hydrogen alpha light so that we can see the large prominences that shoot off from the sun. And the sun is actually a very dynamic object to look at in that wavelength of light.
And this telescope is totally safe to be used to look at the sun, which we're told from an early age that we should never do.
Oh, absolutely, not a problem at all.
This has been fascinating, John. I'm glad you've been able to bring these items to our studio to share with our customers for our program on holiday astronomy products. If you have a question for us, please send it to our email address that you see at the bottom of our screen. If you'd like to find out more, please visit our website, which you'll also see at the bottom of our screen. Stay tuned. After this list of upcoming events, we'll have our What's Up segment.
Thanks, Don. Let's look to see what's up in the night sky for December 2009. The full moon starts us off on the 2nd of December. That's a Wednesday. Most of the quarters are on Wednesday, leading to Thursday later. The 3rd quarter comes next on the 9th of December. With the new moon on the 16th of December, you'll pretty much not see the moon on the 16th. Then we have a 1st quarter moon in the evening of Christmas Eve, the 24th of December, which is a Thursday. And then finally, we end the month off with a full moon again, and on the 31st of December. And the 2nd full moon in a calendar month is, according to Sky and Telescope, a blue moon. So we get one of these once in a while. Jupiter and Neptune, Jupiter in particular, is in the southwest, and it dominates the evening sky at sunset. And Jupiter and Neptune are close together in Capricorn. That's pretty much it for the evening sky. In the morning, we have Mars in Leo and Saturn in the constellation Virgo in the early morning. Look to the northeastern horizon. In December, on the 13th and 14th, we have the Geminid meteor shower. They get their name from the radiant of the meteor shower, which is in Gemini, and the radiant is the place that you end up if you trace all of the meteors back to where they seem to have come from. They all seem to have come from Gemini. On the 20th of December, Jupiter and Neptune get very close together. They come within a ½ degree apart. That's about the same diameter as the full moon, but it comes on the 20th, which is between the new moon and the 1st quarter. You need to use a pair of binoculars at least, if not a telescope, to see Neptune. It's too faint for the naked eye, even under very dark sky conditions. And if you're using a telescope, you need to use a low power eyepiece, and I recommend 50 power or less to get both objects into the same field of view. Neptune is 30 AU from us. That's 30 times the distance from the Earth to the Sun, so it's quite faint. Mercury is going to be extremely difficult to see. Venus is hard to see, but it does rise a ½ an hour before sunrise in the morning, and those two objects are in Sagittarius, as is the Sun. And that's pretty much it for what's up in the night sky for December 2009.